So I'm a native Virginian, born and raised in Chesterfield County. Graduated from VMI and then served as a naval officer. Did a tour out of Pearl Harbor on a cruiser, go Navy, and then came back here and served in Little Creek on a really cool little ship called the USS Shamal. It was one of the coastal patrol ships that was over there for a while. Got out of the Navy, went to UVA for law school, and as she mentioned, did a few things, served as a law clerk for Clarence Thomas on the U.S. Supreme Court, served as an associate White House counsel for President Bush, where my main job was advising the president on separation of powers and how to deal with the legislative branch primarily. And then got out of Washington, D.C. At the end of the Bush administration, came back home to Chesterfield. My wife Lisa and I have 4 young sons. So we're raising them where we were raised in our hometown, which is a great thing to be able to do. Served as a federal prosecutor for about 3.5 years, primarily focused on white-collar crime. So during the economic meltdown, there was a lot of that going on. Spent a good bit of my time doing that. Prosecuted some corrupt public officials. And then got into private practice about 5 years ago. I'm at a law firm based out of Richmond. It's a big law firm, 1,100 lawyers. Is that too many lawyers or what? I mean, that is too many lawyers. So I've been there about 5 years. I'm the chair of one of our litigation departments, and so I help run about 65 lawyers around the country. And, you know, in private practice, I've been doing the kind of things in my off time that all of us do. I've tried to help Republicans get elected. I've done pro bono legal work. I filed briefs on behalf of the Little Sisters of the Poor in the U.S. Supreme Court. I filed briefs in the predecessor case, Hobby Lobby, in the Supreme Court. But generally, probably like a lot of you, completely dissatisfied with what's going on in my home Commonwealth. Okay? We have not a single statewide elected conservative to stand up for us or to defend us from the overreach coming out of Washington, D.C. And that's just unacceptable. And when Mark Herring said he was going to run for re-election, I said, not on my watch. That's actually something I can do something about, because I've spent my life dedicated to the law, and I looked at the way he's handled that office, which is, there's not even words to describe how I feel about it. I have no desire to be a politician. I've never run for office before. I don't care about seeing my name in the newspaper. It's not my job. It's not my career. I don't owe anything to anybody except you, if I am elected, to defend the Constitution of Virginia and the United States. And I looked at what he has done, and it is an abomination as a lawyer. It ignores the most basic duties of a lawyer to his client, to swear to uphold our Constitution and then turn around and attack it within a few weeks. For the life of me, I've never understood why the Virginia House of Delegates didn't move to impeach him when he did that. So when he said he was going to run for re-election, I looked at the field, I looked at what was going on in the Commonwealth, and I jumped into the race. Because it's going to take citizens to stand up and take our government back, not career politicians. It's just not going to work. So that's why I got into the race. I am kind of an open book. You can ask me anything you want. You can ask about my background. You can ask how I view things. I think this time is better spent in a dialogue and a discussion. So why don't we just have a conversation? Yeah.
I have a question for you. I was trying to work through a previous Attorney General who became governor, and we had the General Assembly passing unconstitutional law. And so I went to the Attorney General and asked him, what could we do as citizens? And he explained to me that his job was to represent the General Assembly and not to act on my behalf, but rather to be their lawyer and to prepare a case to make their unconstitutional law constitutional. And he said, I don't have standing as a citizen to bring any kind of a challenge to the constitutionality of Virginia law. And I puzzled over that, puzzled over it. So some people in this room sued the General Assembly, and we won. And that law was found to be unconstitutional by unanimous decision of the Supreme Court of Virginia. So my question is, what is the job of the Attorney General? Are you the lawyer for the General Assembly, or are you our lawyer to keep the General Assembly in check? And how do we have standing to sue the General Assembly when they pass unconstitutional law?
Yeah.
Based on the Constitution of the state.
Yeah, great question. You are absolutely not the lawyer for the General Assembly. So that's very clear, right? You are the lawyer for a sovereign state. The Attorney General is not your lawyer. He's not this group's lawyer. You're not the lawyer for the legislature. You're not the lawyer for the governor. You're the lawyer for a sovereign state. That is the job of the Attorney General. What an Attorney General should do in that role, just like any good lawyer, if your client's about to do something stupid, you stop them. And that is what the Attorney General should do when the legislature is involved in a process that is unconstitutional. That's the lawyer's job. In other words, the Attorney General doesn't wait until the legislature passes a law that's unconstitutional to deal with it. Like any good lawyer, you advise your client not to pass the law or to make changes to the law to make it comply with the Constitution. So that's how you fix that problem before it should never have gotten into the situation where citizens have to sue. That's to me the role of the counselor.
Should got your money back.
Yes, sir.
Right. I've met Chuck Smith. He's going to be going up against you.
Yep.
And he's a very principled individual.
Sure.
What, where would you, without, I'm not saying sling mud, but where do you think you could be more effective?
Good question. So let me just get all this out there for you right now. I spend more time with Chuck Smith and Rob Bell than I do with my family nowadays. Okay. So you can laugh because it's not funny. I'm telling you what. We are on the road all the time together. And I will say this about both of those guys. They're good guys. I like both of them. We actually have a good time out on the trail. Most events I do like this, they're sitting over there and we're all taking turns, right? So I will not sling mud because I have no mud to sling. But I'm not in this for the fun of it. I'm in it because I think I'm the best person for the job. So let me run through both of them, both Rob and
the
Chuck.
point being is usually when you've got 2 or 3 guys that are, I don't know anything about Rob Bell, if you've got 2 or 3 guys that are usually good, they usually decimate each other and the incumbent invariably walks into it. No competition.
I'm with you on that. So the thing about Chuck is the first rule about Chuck Smith, how many of y'all know Chuck? The first rule about Chuck Smith is never speak after him. Because he will light up a room with his oratory. And every time he comes off stage, I'm going after him like, thanks. Here's my thing on Chuck, and candidly about Rob too. And I know you don't know Rob, but this is very similar.
I do.
You know Rob? Okay. Rob and I are incredibly different people with incredibly different backgrounds. Rob is a good guy. As far as I can tell, he's been a really good legislator. But I've spent my life fighting legal battles, helping to run law firms, and making tough legal decisions based on the Constitution. That's what I've been doing. That is the job of the Attorney General. And Chuck sort of, I don't know, I'll be honest with you about Chuck. I like Chuck a lot. I just don't know as much about Chuck. I don't know much about his practice, what he does as a lawyer. I know he was a Marine, and I know he was in the JAG Corps, and as a former naval officer, I love that. But as far as his legal background, I just don't know it. But I will tell you about mine. Mine prepares me to do the job, okay? The second thing is, I think mine prepares me to beat Herring, and I'll tell you why. I'm not worried about the people in this room, okay? Because we're conservatives, we understand limited government, we understand the rule of law, right? When you get out of the general election, I think what Herring has done on so many occasions is so over the top that even that 30% that sit in the middle and you have to win in a general election, they get the sense something is wrong. They get the sense that they don't have a voice. They get the sense that you don't have government of, by, and for the people when your Attorney General refuses to enforce the laws you pass through your legislature. And I think people are starting to feel that. And the best way to beat that is for us as conservatives and Republicans to say, you know what, this is a job, the Attorney General, that runs a law firm of 260 lawyers. Think about that for a minute. 260 lawyers whose sole responsibility should be defending our sovereignty at all levels. The best way to beat Mark Herring is run a lawyer against him. He is a career politician who has taken that legal job and turned it into his own political bully pulpit to do what he thinks is right. And so I think the way we beat him is we run a lawyer, someone who has done it for their career, someone who's done it and has the experience necessary to draw a sharp contrast with him. Because I'm not in this race because I want to be elected. I'm not in this race because I want to be a politician. I don't want my name in lights. I'd rather it wasn't. I'm in it because this is dangerous, and Mark Herring is undermining government of, by, and for the people, and it's hard to beat an incumbent. Oh, yeah.
Okay. In what areas do you see the most egregious, unconstitutional big government overreaches, and what makes those examples so destructive if they're not so obvious? If that answer is not that obvious, what makes those examples so destructive to freedom-loving Americans?
There's a lot to choose from. There's a lot to choose from, so I'm going to tell you one that I think is incredibly destructive on a big picture scale, okay? The growth of the regulatory state at the federal level.
Yes.
So here's what I think. I think what happened is, through a series of court decisions in the 1970s, the Supreme Court made it easy for members of Congress to basically say, we're going to pass a statute that has nothing to it, really, and turn over the interpretation and enforcement to a regulatory body. Now, keep in mind, you don't elect these people in the regulatory bodies, you can't unelect them.
That's right.
So, how many of you have heard this from an elected official? I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do, it's the EPA.
Yep.
Right. That is the number one problem we have, because what they've done is, they've done two things at one time. They've inoculated themselves from accountability, even though they're the ones we elect, and they've let people who are not accountable run roughshod over every aspect of our lives, right? Business, social, everything. So to me, the biggest concern is actually at the federal level. I'm gonna go for another couple seconds on this, because there's a lot of things to cover. The brilliance of our founding fathers was, right, they just fought a war to throw off a king. So they knew what they were dealing with. So when they created the federal government under our Constitution, they said, we gotta fix this, and they did it two ways that were brilliant. One was separation of powers between the three branches, right? Divide it up so that it's not one totally powerful entity. And the destruction of that is primarily what I just said, the growth of the regulatory state. Because now, it's the courts and the regulatory state that do everything. So that's one problem. The second problem is, see, the founders were brilliant. Those of us who hate, I shouldn't say that, that's not, my mom always said never use that word. Those of us who have concerns about government.
Say either word.
Yeah, those of us who have concerns about government, this doesn't sound intuitive, but it's brilliant. They realized two governments were better than one, right? Two governments are better than one. So not only did you have a federal government, you had a state government, right? So they realized this was a brilliant scheme, because if you have two sovereigns, then neither one gets too powerful. So everyone in this room is an American, and everyone in this room is a Virginian. And the idea is that the states possessed all of the reserve powers of the state, except for what was enumerated, right, to the feds. Brilliant system until we completely blew it, right? And there's a million different reasons why we blew it. Taking money is one way we blew it. But what we've got to do as a country, right, is we've got to get back to this idea of federalism, and we have to get back to this idea of accountability in the federal system away from the regulatory state.
And smaller government.
And smaller government, of course. Well, the reason you have big government is because of the regulatory. I mean, it really is. The regulatory state drives a huge, huge chunk of that. That's absolutely right. Yes. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
In 1798-99, Madison and Jefferson wrote the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions
Yes.
about nullification. So, is it actually possible for states to impose their sovereignty on the federal government through those kind of principles of nullification?
So this is some of us were talking about this.
You want me to ask mine?
Well, yeah, I think they're all.
Just the same question as
Yeah.
his, really, which is,
'Cause I see states as the last refuge.
I agree with you.
so
Go ahead.
as a person who views it not as the Civil War, but the War of Northern Aggression, we were discussing before you started the whole principle of the corporation doctrine, how that got its footing, and the supremacy clause, or the supremacy doctrine of the federal government. And I guess just compare, I would like to hear you compare and contrast yourself with the other candidates, but also answer his question.
Sure. On the, I'm just going to wrap it all up and call it the doctrine of nullification for ease of this discussion. I don't think there's going to be a difference between me and Rob on our views on that. I'd be shocked if there's a difference between me and Rob. I don't know about Chuck. I haven't heard Chuck talk about nullification, so I don't know. So it's hard to know. I don't want to speak for them, right? We've been out doing stuff, but people haven't gotten this intense on some of these questions where we're all together. It's good. Got a hurricane outside. It's just a nice night. Here's my view. The answer is yes, we have to assert, and one of my goals as Attorney General would be to assert our sovereignty in areas right where we retain our sovereign rights, which is the vast majority of rights that we have, those we didn't cede to the federal government.
Article 1, Section 8 is pretty clear.
Article 1, Section 8 is pretty clear. That's absolutely right. There's a million examples of how you can actually effectively do that. The President's Clean Power Plan is unconstitutional. 22 states got together, led by West Virginia. When's the last time Virginia was led by West Virginia? Right? I shouldn't joke about it. That's an old joke. I shouldn't joke about it with everything our friends in West Virginia are going through. But you get my point. Right? We should have been at the forefront of that lawsuit. But you can win, right? And as of right now, at least for now, they've won at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has stayed the Clean Power Plan. So there are ways that you can fight and win those if you have an Attorney General with the courage and the ability to fight them. The tougher, much tougher question, and I'm going to admit to you it's a tough question, which they asked earlier is, what about where you have a dispute over whether it is a federal power or not in the first place? And this is the way I phrase it, is who gets to decide, right? And the question that we worked on earlier, and there's not an easy answer, and I don't know that I'm going to agree with everybody on it, is, when the Supreme Court makes a decision, let's just take gay marriage for example. Okay, gay marriage decision. Totally made up. Right? Totally made up. Not in the Constitution anywhere. In fact, I'll just offer you this. If you haven't done it, read Justice Scalia's and then Justice Thomas's dissents in that case. It's an amazing set of dissents. But take that for example. When the Supreme Court makes that decision and Virginia says, wait a minute, we look at the Constitution, it's not in the Constitution, there's no way the federal government has the right to define a marriage, that's obviously something left to the state. What does Virginia do? I mean, this to me comes down, this is what the context in which I think about your nullification, right? So what does Virginia do? Does Virginia have the right to say no?
Yeah.
Okay? So then the question is, and this is what I say to people, you're the citizens, right? So how does Virginia say no? You have to have a legislative act. Virginia has to say no. In the wake of the Supreme Court decision in Virginia, we have decided we are going to ignore the Supreme Court decision. We are going to say marriage is between a man and a woman. That is the law of Virginia, and the Supreme Court is wrong. They got it wrong. We didn't see that power, and that's what we're going to do. So if the legislature was willing to do that, and ours wouldn't, by the way, if they were willing to do that, what happens next? You got to kind of play these things out. I do this stuff because I'm a law nerd. Right? They're going to say, what happens? So the first gay couple gets married because someone somewhere says, I'm going to do it anyway because the Supreme Court said I have to. The state has said it's illegal now. I'm an American and a Virginian. I have conflicting laws. Okay, you can pick in your mind. They go one way or the other. So what happens?
They can move to another state.
No, but I'm with you on that. Believe me, I've had this debate with my little friends about moving to other states all the time. I'm with you. I'm a fan. But what happens, right, is the federal courts come in and say we're gonna put this person in jail. They're violating federal law, or we're gonna take away this person's license. So all I'm saying is when you talk about nullification, you got to really think about it to its end. and its end leads in secession. I mean, that's where it is.
Doesn't the end lead to the sheriff's constitutional officer in the county saying no?
Sure, yeah, that's right, but I'm just saying, what it leads to is secession. It does. It leads to a point where you say,
Just don't do it. Why do you have to secede? Just don't do it.
because at some point, I think, and I know we have a lot of other questions to ask, but we're getting into the weeds, but it leads to a point where you're saying, we disagree with the federal government over whose law is sovereign, and at some point, you reach a breaking point where you say, we're not, right? I mean, that's where it goes. So I'm just telling you as the citizenry, because we get this question a lot about nullification, it's you all, right? And that's where it ultimately leads, unless, and I'm an optimist, okay? I'm an optimist. I clerked for Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court. You give me 4 more Clarence Thomases, we're good. Okay? No, I'm not kidding, we're good. Because they will fix that court in a minute. What we need to do is start running principled conservatives to enforce the laws we have, the Constitution we have. That's how we do it. That's, in my opinion, the best way to do it. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry.
That's fine. What is your take on the war on drugs then?
My take on the war on drugs. I'm a veteran of the war on drugs. I did counter drug work in the Caribbean. I do not support legalization of marijuana. I think drugs are a serious problem, and I think we should have effective enforcement of drugs.
I'd like to follow her question with the following. State of Portugal, Spain, obviously the Netherlands, took the money out of enforcement, treated it as a public health problem. We have anecdotal evidence, and I don't want to get pinned down, 1903, 1913, that the amount of addiction in America, and I'm talking about hardcore addicted people, whether they're addicted to God or cocaine, it doesn't matter. If you're addicted, you're addicted, was about, and it's a startling number, it's 3%. We spent many trillions of dollars, and you know what our addiction rate is in America today? Hardcore addicted, gotta be addicted to something. Drugs, alcohol, God, doesn't matter. It's about 3%. So we spent trillions and trillions of taxpayer dollars, and we've done nothing to actually deal with the problem. We have more drug laws on the books, and we pass more drug laws, and we destroy families, destroy personal sovereignty, which was really the genesis of the question I wanted to prepare you for.
Right.
And we absolutely neither change the supply side or the demand side logistics of the problem. So essentially, the concept is that there will be more governmental interference in personal sovereignty with exactly the same outcome. We can argue whether it was Einstein or whoever said doing more of the same thing and expecting a different result is the sheer definition of insanity, and yet you just advocated that you are committed to insanity.
Yeah, I didn't advocate I was committed to insanity, but thank you. I have 4 young sons, and I do not want to raise them in a country where when they turn 18, we're going to support. I think some, what's that?
Teach them right.
Well, I do teach them
But
right.
I mean, that's the priority lies within the families. We have more people incarcerated in this country free than anywhere else.
Listen,
Because of a lot of
listen.
non-violent or non-victimless crime.
I'm with you 100%. We over-incarcerate people, but I do not think for a minute that we should give up on trying to, not just in our families, but also to try to combat this problem. I mean, look at how many people died from heroin in Virginia last year.
But we have lots of laws against heroin. It's already illegal. We're not affecting supply side or demand side with our current.
How do you know that if you haven't legalized it yet?
We've seen what they've done in places where they have legalized it. All I can do is go study the test cases in the places, and they cut their addiction rates in half. Now, we can argue if you make N big enough in a statistical equation, I can prove that a gnat's significant, but that's not.
Well, let me respond to one other point that I think you were raising. One thing I'm not a fan of, as I said earlier, is big government, okay? There are some things government should do, and what it should do well, right? And then there's a lot of things government does that it shouldn't do at all. Here's where I am with you on your point. We should be smart about how we handle a person who commits nonviolent drug offenses. So I think there's a moral and an ethical argument to not throw every person in jail who commits a nonviolent drug offense. Why? Number one, it costs a ton of money, and two, I've been a prosecutor. When you put a young kid who's nonviolent into the criminal justice system, you can guarantee a bad outcome on the other end. But so I'm with you on that, right? Like I'm much more, I think that's actually one area where Rob and I are probably a little bit different. I'm much more into criminal justice reform on the nonviolent side than Rob. But I'm sorry, I don't believe that that means a complete abdication of regulating illegal drugs. To me, those are two actually slightly different things.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Can we just take one more question from somebody who maybe hasn't asked a question yet? Because we have to wrap it up and move on to the next presentation.
Okay, just to follow up on this, I agree that we shouldn't, I don't agree with legalization of marijuana or any of these other dangerous drugs. But if we were to decriminalize them and take the cartels out of the picture and let an addict go to a pharmacy and for $5 buy his fix instead of having to spend $200 for that same fix, you take the crime right out of the whole system, and then you can regulate.
No, this is what I'm talking about, absolutely, in terms of rehabbing the program, right? So you have drug courts, where instead of putting people into jail, you try to actually save those who are savable. That's a responsible...
So instead of spending the money
Yes, I agree.
on law enforcement, you spend the money on rehab and therapy.
So I found the guy who agrees with me, right? Don't legalize it, right?
More services.
Don't legalize it. No, don't legalize it, but try to save those who are savable. I think that's a responsible approach to it.
So more government with more services, with more rehab and everything else.
No, with much less expenses. And the biggest public safety concern is what you get out on the back end when that 18-year-old has just gone into the criminal justice system and they pop out 5 years later and now they're a member of a gang. All right, did you want?
Yeah, could you just like wrap it up now so that we could,
Good.
closing statement or anything?
No, sure. Look, this has been a lot of fun. I'm at johnadams4virginia.com. We have cards we'll pass out. I'm going to try to stay for the second part of the program, so I should be here afterwards if y'all want to talk more. And thank you all very much for having me.
And if you want to sign up to help, sign up sheets out in the back.
Thank you.
You're welcome.